There was an article on the Christian website Relevant where this author, Bronwyn Lee, basically talked about the 3 tough problems she has had since getting married. And they're not the toughest problems. She's not worried about getting divorced really quickly. She's not worried that there's some major problem between her husband and herself. But she said there were a few small things that were building up that she wasn't expecting. So, for example, she said one of the things is trying to find some alone time, because even when you're at home living with your spouse, it's tough to find time where you could just focus on yourself because the other person's always there. She talked about finding time to spend with your friends. Like, she can't go out, all the time during the week to hang out with her girlfriends because she feels weird leaving her husband at home. And I understand that. And she also talked about how you have to make all of these decisions as a couple all the time. Not crazy big decisions, but small ones that you have to make all the time. Like, what are we gonna have for dinner? Who's gonna cook dinner? Who's gonna wash the dishes? How soon after dinner are you gonna wash dishes? And you gotta work that stuff out as a couple. And she said, when people ask her about what marriage is like, she said it's a big adjustment. And that's kind of the euphemism for what she was really feeling. Loves her husband, doesn't want to not be married, but she said trying to work through all those things was very difficult. And you can kind of see where she's coming from, but here's the problem with that. There's a way to solve a lot of those problems, and she just totally glossed over it. And the solution is live with your partner before you get married. It seems like a pretty obvious solution. If you just spend some time with each other, living together, before you take that, official legal leap, you can kind of figure out what makes the other person tick. You figure out what their quirks are, and you learn how to adjust. And you know what? Worst case scenario, you figure out that, maybe this person isn't someone I'm ready to spend the rest of my life with, and maybe jumping into marriage isn't the decision we want to make. It's a lot easier to cohabitate and separate than it is to get married and then divorced. This whole thing reminds me of this whole evangelical purity culture mentality, that you're ruining something special if you experience it too early. And a lot of Christians like to say that, cohabitation will lead to divorce. It leads to unhappy marriages. The statistics say people who live together don't fare as well as couples who move in together when they're married. But what a lot of those statistics don't tell you is that who tends to live together? It's people who are younger, who may want to save money on rent by living together, and it's oftentimes people who don't have a lot of money. And the age factor, the money factor, those are some of the reasons people tend to get divorced anyway. So it's not the cohabitation that's the issue. It's that when you're young, possibly immature, when you have a lot of money struggles, financial struggles, yeah, you're more likely to get divorced. It turns out when you take all those other issues, when you control for all those other factors, people who live together before marriage fare just as well as people who live together after they get married. And by the way, I'm not saying that marriage is easy. Every couple has their problems, and the ones we're talking about in this video right now, these are not major problems. But all I'm saying is, if there's a way to work out some of these issues before you get married, before they snowball into something that you can't control anymore, why not even consider cohabitation as a possible solution? And that's what Miss Lee didn't do in her article. And the funny thing is, she fully acknowledges in the comments section on a separate article she wrote elsewhere that that's a possibility, but it's not one, she would ever consider or endorse. Why not? Nothing. There's just silence. She has no good reason for not really wanting it, except for the sort of fear-mongering that a lot of people do, that, maybe they're afraid, like, well, if you live together, you're going to have sex before marriage, and then the world's going to explode or something like that. It's crazy. Cohabitation isn't going to be for everybody, but maybe it's something, if it's good for you, if it's good for your partner, then give it a shot. On a personal note, I did live with my wife about a year before we got married, and I'm really, really glad we did, because it gave us both a chance to know what we're both like living together. She learned my quirks, I learned her quirks, and I think that's a positive thing. When we finally did get married, there have not been any big surprises so far, and I think that's the thing that kind of shook up the Christian author of that article, that there were all these surprises. I haven't experienced that. When people ask me, what's married life like? I've been able to answer them, that's pretty much the same as pre-married life was. And I mean that in the best possible way. Again, cohabitation worked for us. It may not work for everybody, but why not at least consider it? Because it gives you a chance to kind of give your marriage a trial run. And you can, if things go great, you know exactly what you're going into. And if it doesn't work out, you can kind of put the brakes on this relationship before it gets even more serious. My name is Hemant Mehta, and I write at FenleyAtheist.com. Please leave a comment below, and we will check them out.